Hello YouTube. This is a fascinating subject, as anything connected to the history of piracy would be, as attested by Hollywood motion pictures. But the aspect I'm going to tell you about is basically unknown outside of Russia and Eastern Europe, certain parts of Eastern Europe. Although in Russian history it is customary not to advertise such a phenomenon as piracy, the most ancient Russian pirates, the Ushkuiniks, have left quite a memory of themselves. They appear in ancient chronicles, and the scale of their military craft is amazing. These militant detachments were so hardy and professional that they can be jokingly called Old Russian Special Forces. The Ushkuiniks are often compared to Vikings and Varangians, and even the pirates themselves sincerely consider that they are the descendants. Pavolnik in Russian, Old Russian, is a free man who trades in robbery, and that's how they describe themselves. This type of activity was common among the Ushkuiniks in northern Russia. The pirates took advantage of the lack of deterrent forces on the territory of the great old Russian city of Novgorod. The Ushkuiniks carefully trained brigand squads robbed not only lands of Novgorod, but also nearby settlements. To no lesser extent, those pirates raged in Lithuania, Scandinavia. They attacked Yugra, the land of the Golden Woman, and the Volga Bulgars. But the main interest to them lay in furs, so all the forces of the sea robbers focused on the Volga and Kama rivers. So in 1181, the Ushkuiniks raided the city of Koksharov. Those Ushkuiniks are not just like ordinary robbers armed with anything and randomly attacking everyone. These were professional military detachments supported by Novgorod and equally well prepared for both foot and horse combat. They were incredibly hardy because they had good training to survive in extreme conditions. When going to battle, the Ushkuiniks put on chain mail made of steel rings shells, into which plates of steel were sometimes woven. As weapons, they had sabers, swords, spears, and for shooting, they used bows and crossbows with powerful steel arrows. The ancient Russian pirates chose their target wisely and attacked in a cunning way, too, and their raids were equally successful both during the day and at night. In addition to the skills of combat and riding, all the Ushkuiniks were well versed in rowing, because one of their main advantages was the ability to quickly get away from the chase on boats. These vessels were called Ushkuis. They gave the name to the old Russian pirates, as you can understand, and were long, narrow vessels with one mast in the center and one sail. On the bow of such a vessel, as a rule, there was a bear's head, because from the northern dialect, the word ushkui is translated as bear. The ushkui were usually built of pine and were so light that the pirates carried them on their hands, holding them high above their heads. This was also their advantage. In case of pursuit by the enemy, they could walk several kilometers with such a boat. Having reached the shore of the nearest river, the Ushkuiniks quickly put the vessel on the waters, got into it, and left the chase. Although in the old Russian chronicles they were called river robbers, they sailed perfectly on their ushkuis, also on the sea. Moreover, river and sea ushkuis differed in their design. The pirates were especially ferocious on the Volga River and in the Caspian Sea. In 1318, the Ushkuy sailed to the capital of Finland, Abo, it's modern Turku, and robbed it, taking the Vatican's church tax for several years. Then they attacked the cities of Norway, and the local government even asked for help from the Papal See to organize a crusade against the robbers. Perhaps fearing a similar raid on its territories, Sweden in 1323 concluded the Noteberg peace with the city of Grand Novgorod, or Veliki Novgorod, and because they had influence on the pirates, which in fact was the first official treaty that established the borders between the Novgorod state and the Swedish lands. In 1360, the pirates decided to strike at the Golden Horde, reasonably assuming that the Tatars have something to profit from, which means they need to impose tribute on them. So they went by boat along the Volga to the mouth of the Kama River, after which they captured the rich Tatar city of Zhukotin and plundered it. When the pirates were in Kostroma, after successful robberies, the Russian Suzdal princes, under orders of the Khan Khizr, cooperating with local residents, secretly entered the city, seized the Ushkuniks along with all their riches, and took them to the Khan. The betrayal of the princes angered the pirates even more, and very soon they resumed their raids, this time targeting the Russian cities of Nizhny Novgorod, Yaroslavl, and of course Kostroma. I must say, such a servile attitude of the Russian princes to their horde at that time caused outrage even among ordinary residents. In many chronicles, this act is regarded as a desire to curry favor with the Khan, the Mongol Tatar ruler, and the authors in the chronicles called the representatives of the Golden Horde filthy. In addition, a hypothesis is put forward that the capture of the Ushkuniks took place with the tacit consent of Novgorod, which also caused indignation. Meanwhile, the Ushkuniks continued to attack the Tatars until the end of the 14th century. The warlike pirates even managed to capture the capital of the great Khan, the city of Sarai. Some historians consider Russian pirates to be noble robbers who helped Novgorod in the fight against the Tatars, but the facts say that the Ushkuniks attacked everyone from whom it was possible to have something, to get something. Regardless of their nationality, their ethnicity, they were just ordinary robbers. In the Ushkunik detachments, intelligence service was well organized. Historians suggest that among the spies of these pirates were Turks and Finns, and later Cossacks. This is why the campaigns of the Ushkuniks to the cities of the Golden Horde, as a rule, were successful. It seemed that the robbers were perfectly oriented on the terrain, already knowing in advance where everything is located. And then centuries pass, and we look at the Cossack pirates, robbers of the Black Sea, and today that's the territory mainly of Ukraine and, of course, Russian territories as well. So it's all interconnected. The Cossacks were feared for their bloodthirsty. They were bloodthirsty, and they were respected for their fearlessness. In 1510, the Crimean Khan, fighting the piracy of the Cossacks, blocked the Dnieper River to strengthen the Archakov fortress, but the pirates raided Ackerman and other localities on the same scale. River robbers totally plundered all coastal territories. Enterprising Cossacks who found their way to the Black Sea through the rivers cruelly took revenge on the Khan's troops for women and children who were taken into slavery. The Cossacks adopted to cross unmaneuverable boats, which with the necessary share of romance were called chaiki or seagulls. They were maximally adapted for coastal and river navigation. If necessary, the vessels were carried on their shoulders. There were already 20 more pirates in the seagull, for example, in Chaika, than the old Ushkui could afford to have. Irregular military adventurers armed with sabers, muskets, and cannons attacked mainly at night. Over 2 centuries, pirates have made 25 raids, including attacks on Constantinople, Sinop, Kafu, and Varna fortresses. The fame of the brave sea robbers spread throughout Europe. They participated in the wars against Spain and helped to capture French fortresses. Only the year 1625 became very fatal for them. Then, at the mouth of the Danube River, the Turkish squadron was able to sink the Cossack flotilla. In captivity, the pirates were undoubtedly subjected to cruel torture and a painful death, just as they treated the captive Turks, of course. But then we move on to the privateer fleet of Ivan the Terrible. Actually, the correct translation of his name is Ivan the Formidable or Fearsome, but the British Secret Service, who poisoned the Czar, most likely intentionally mistranslated his name. By the 16th century, Ivan Vasilievich, the Terrible One, had already captured Narva, which opened the entrance to the Baltic for the Russian state. Trade was immediately established. English merchants shamelessly profited from promising cooperation, as well did the same Swedish pirates. When the robbery reached its apex, Ivan the Terrible created a privateer fleet, where the Dane Karsten Rode was invited. The Czar generously granted him the rank of sea ataman, or chieftain, giving him broad powers. In return, the robber should give to the treasury of the Russian Tsardom the best cannon and 1/10 of the money from the seized profits. Rode's first campaign could not be crowned with success due to the lack of proper equipment and a vessel, but everything turned out well. Courage and willingness to take risks allowed the robber to surprise the enemy. The Swedes surrendered almost without a fight. Further sea raids were completed by the Muscovite highwayman more and more easily. He destroyed enemy merchants on a grand scale and appropriated wealth for himself. And by the end of the 1560s, the squadron was replenished with 16 armed vessels. The first Russian privateer, feeling his strength, shamelessly began to violate the treaty with Tsar Ivan the Terrible. However, already in 1570, the Tsar gave Narva to the Swedes. Rode began to be chased, to be persecuted. While trying to hide in Denmark, he was arrested and imprisoned in the basement of the castle, where he died. Now, let's look at the story of the legendary Russian ataman, chieftain Stepan Razin. Before the uprising he became famous for, Razin was one of the most brutal Caspian sea robbers. The episode in 1667, when the pirate commanded a large army, turned out to be especially vivid. For such many fighters that he had, the ataman could not find vessels, so he took several hundred of the best warriors to sea, but the rest moved along the shore. The official goal of the campaign was a noble goal to free the Slavs of the Caspian Sea from the slavery of the Persians. In fact, the pirate, with due skill, formed the Don fleet, from the ships captured from those Persian merchants who were brave enough to travel about and engage in trade. In pursuit of Persian sharp-chested ships, the chieftain was captured near Astrabat, announcing a false reconciliation. The pirate promised the local Shah a rich treasury, ships, and other items. No one knows for sure about the further development of events. However, historians agree that Razin quietly pulled out a saber and cut off the Shah's head. As a result, the fearless highwayman returned to the dawn with a generous booty in the company of beautiful Persian women. There was a popular song in Russia about the chieftain Stenka, who pleasantly spent all his time with the Persian princess, to the point that he abandoned strategic planning, brainstorming, goal setting, and the bottom line of his enterprise. Well, his colleagues became enraged and expressed their discontent openly. To show his dedication to the cause and not to be cancelled by the scorned team members, the CEO, Stepan Razin, threw the Persian princess into the waves of the river. Just to make sure you know, the Russian piracy also existed under the leadership of the Empress Catherine II. During the reign of Her Majesty, Empress Catherine II, Her Imperial Majesty, the empire needed allies to fight Turkey. The solution was found by the Greek pirates, who skillfully combined brazen robbery with liberation warfare. As soon as possible, it was decided to establish a base for the Russian fleet on the islands of the Aegean Sea. The vessels were delivered to the place in strict secrecy. There was also a successful naval school where experienced corsair or pirates taught the basics of boarding and arson techniques to everyone who desired to learn them. Now, before you start belittling the Empress, please know that she greatly helped the American revolutionaries against the British Empire, not through piracy, but in other ways. Now about the war cry, Sarin na Kichku. What does this terrible cry of the Russian pirates mean? There are several accounts or hypotheses about what it meant. To unravel the meaning of the phrase, a philologist Severskaya, in an article in the magazine Russian Language, issue number 5, March 2010, refers to the Dahl's dictionary. Their Sarin, AO, is mentioned in the semantics of garbage or litter. Then the word acquired a second figurative meaning and began to be used to refer to commoners, rabble, and the boatmen. The semantics of the Kichka is explained by the writer and long-distance sailing captain Konetsky. This was the name of a special platform on the bow of the vessel in the part of the watercraft opposite from the stern. They made a Kichka so that it would be convenient for the team or for the crew to fix the rope with a multi-vessel anchor load. Standing on the keel, the sailors secured the rope from one side of the ship and then from the other. On the opposite side of the Kichka was usually the cabin of the owner or captain, which means that somewhere near the stern, look for the most valuable prey. This was known by the sea wolves, who robbed everything more or less large that sailed on the waters. In this terrible, fearsome cry, you can even hear some concern for the ship's crew, which mainly consisted of rabble and boatmen. With a shout, The robbers or pirates announced the beginning of the robbery, urging the crew to run to the bow of the ship, lie down on the deck, and not be heroic. Then they say no one will get hurt during the robbery. The boatmen, the rabble, obeyed. There were usually no people willing to protect the ship owner's goods at the cost of their lives. Severska gives another hypothesis for the appearance of that battle cry or war cry. The Volga robbers and pirates got it from the Polovets tribes. Art historian Almazov wrote that among the Don Cossacks, there were many descendants of the Polovets Sari who remembered the ancient cry of their ancestors before the attack, Sarin Kochak, which literally translated from the ancient Turkic as glory to the brave. In another translation, the cry could mean Polovet Sari, go ahead. In this sense, I think the inspiring appeal to the pirates of Stepan Razin, whose ancestors were from the Basurman, or foreigners, that could be used. It is curious that the Volga robbers borrowed many words and phrases from the Basurman, creating an argot, a slang, conditional language that was incomprehensible to the outsiders. For example, they called the division of the loot Duvan, Duvanit. The Russian researcher Tkachov Ivanov does not agree with the stated hypothesis. He recalls that the Don Cossacks actively used this war cry before the battles with the Chinese. According to the researcher, the Don Cossacks were constantly in conflict with the Chinese who settled along the Silk Road. Chinese merchants willingly came to Mirgorod for the famous Sorochinsky Fair. Actually, the fair got its name from the Chinese merchants Sorochina. That's because they traded on it. Now, Tkachov Ivanov believes this is how it happened. In the Russian chronicles, the Sorochin Chinese were called Polovchins, and the Cossacks were nicknamed Sarin. Yermak, the Russian chieftain and leader of the conquerors of Siberia, the Russian conquistadores, for example, considered everyone living beyond the Volga as Sarin, that is, outsiders, Chinese. A Kichka was also called a knife. So they used Kichka as the word for the knife, which the Cossacks carried behind the boot top. So the cry, according to Tkachov Ivanov, literally meant a bloody call. The Chinese to be put to the knife. The first hypothesis I presented is still considered to be the most popular one. The Volga robbers shouted an intimidating call as a warning. Literally, the phrases meant that everyone would not be killed, only the loot would be taken away, and the Sarin will be left alive. In this case, Sarin meant like bastard, so humiliatingly were called ordinary members of the crew who originated from the common people. It is next to Stenka's name that the phrase is used most often today, but now it is usually filled with the semantics of a tough, macho, desperate robber act. By the way, I need to add that the Don Cossacks often prefer to marry Turkish women and appreciated their qualities, but this takes us out of the context of this video. Now, I will tell you how the Cossack river pirates cooked their fish soup, the fabulous uha. I have consumed various kinds of the uha throughout my life, but not this one. But that's understandable. This way of the uha preparation was narrated by Pavel Severny, Russian author of the 20th century, based on historical records. Just a few explanations. Bobil refers to a lonely unmarried man. Ataman is, like I said, Kazakh chieftain or leader. Boyar means Russian medieval aristocrat. Vogul refers to the northern tribe in Russian north, and I've talked about them in my other videos. So let me tell you, the field cook of the ataman's boat or vessel, an old Cossack covered in scars and wounds, nicknamed Bobil the Grey by his comrades, started to cook, as he himself expressed it, a boyar's uha, the red one, but he demanded the good-natured young assistants to first clean and gut a fair batch of other scaly fish. The volunteers were found, and soon all the living contents of the 3 wooden buckets, the walleye, ruff, yazi, and the brimfish, migrated to the voluminous cast iron boiler, which had long served the entire crew of the boat. The cook threw in onions, garlic, saffron, and pepper into the fish broth. The fish soup with such seasoning was called the red one. When the fish meat began to fall off from the bones by itself and the color of the brew turned amber, the cook ordered the broth to be drained through a rare canvas into a bucket, and all the boiled fish meat left with the bones on the canvas was simply thrown aside. The Cossacks, marveling at such waste, waited with curiosity to see what would follow next. Bobil the Grey one, the gray-haired one, officiated like a Vogul shaman. He raked the cut coals of the fire and extracted from the heat another small iron pot where the Saracen millet, which later became known as rice, was cooked. The stock of this rare grain, taken near Astrakhan during a pilfering raid on Persian merchants, was already coming to an end. The ataman ordered to give out a little of it to everyone for refueling, so to say, fish soup that day. The cook put the boiled grain into a cauldron, poured amber fish broth from a bucket, and ordered his entire crew to be called to the table. But the ataman asked that the fish soup be given to the wounded comrades, and the rest of the Cossacks were to eat the boiled fish meat, to which they agreed. This is what I wanted to let you know today, and I'll bring you more interesting stories from the history of Russia and neighboring countries. And if you like my research, I ask that you please support it through the links you will find in the description to this video. Please like my channel, and the next time you hear Sarin na Kichku war cry, you will be able to reference it. Thank you for your attention to my work.